It's time for a Song of Ice and Fire. Right after this sandwich. Straight fire! Welcome, all A Song of Ice and Fire nerds, to my show Grey Sheep and Hedge Wizards. This will be episode 33, I think, and the topic for today will be The Others, Part 2. In accord with the fantasy tradition, the prologue of the story is where the big bad is introduced. The big bad meaning the big villain, the ultimate villain of the story. And that's the Others. The tall, slender, beautiful ice zombies with unbreakable swords that are impossibly thin and sharp and fast, and armor that camouflages them to their surroundings, and an aura of cold temperature, apparently, so that wherever they go, they make the place habitable for themselves. Because apparently they're weak to fire. They don't like fire. That's how Sam kills a Wight. And, well, that was one of the things I needed to talk about, was the distinction between Others and Wights, among many other things. So let's get to it. First up are corrections. I said some things in past videos that were incorrect, and I don't like to leave those things, so I'm going to address those. In A Song of Ice and Fire Theories video, I said that Willem Dary's name is not mentioned in the story about Rhaegar coming to his master-at-arms, saying it seems I must be a warrior. But that was incorrect. Willem Dary's name is mentioned directly in that story, as told by Sir Barristan Selmy to Daenerys Targaryen. And another correction is that I misunderstood something Good Queen Ali wrote in her essay about Willem Dary, where she said that we should not assume that Willem Dary was just a flatterer of King Aerys, the Mad King. And I read it the opposite way, as though that was what she was saying. But it wasn't, so I didn't mean to misrepresent it that way. And I agree with her there. There is no reason to assume that Willem Dary would have been a flatterer of the Mad King, just because the Mad King chose him. I think that's all for corrections. On to the topic for today, The Others. In the last episode, we talked about how the Others are George R. R. Martin's response, of a sort, to the rise of moral relativism. And moral relativism is that there is no right and wrong. Morality is relative to each person. Because something being right for me doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be right for you, and vice versa. And likewise, something being right for us doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be right for everyone. And so that's one of the moral insights behind moral relativity. I think it's a good insight, and it's right. But that, like any idea, to apply it universally all the time, everywhere, for everything and everyone, is doomed to fail. No idea can accommodate every single thing, everywhere, for everyone, all the time. And that's why we need lots of good ideas in conversation with each other. So the ideas that we live by can't carry us with it off the cliff of its pathology. Throughout the course of A Song of Ice and Fire, the story consistently punishes the reader for condemning people as villains. Because the characters who you condemned as villains are frequently recontextualized later as more sympathetic than you thought, than you knew. And those are characters like Tyrion and Jaime Lannister, even Cersei Lannister to an extent. This is somewhat the case with Robert Baratheon and Sandor Clegane the Hound, and even the Red Woman Melisandre, who we watch burn people alive. There are clues late in the story in A Dance with Dragons that Melisandre was once a slave, and being a slave to a great extent, the course of her life was out of her control. And whatever horrible things she believes and does today are undoubtedly a consequence of things that happened in her yesterdays. So the story is loaded with these, built-in punishments for the reader, almost every time the reader condemns a character. Even Joffrey. None of us would criticize each other for condemning Joffrey, but you can't deny that as the story goes on, and we get these little pieces of Joffrey's past, they do some work to sympathize him, where we can go, oh, Robert smacked Joffrey upside the head and almost killed him. And with this pattern of sympathetic recontextualization so prevalent throughout the entire series, we naturally assume that the same thing is going to happen with the Others, where these are obviously the most evil villain in the story, And so if the author really wants to drive home the point that everybody has a sympathetic background, he can't not do it with the others, or else that theme will be inconsistent. And however he's going to do it with the others, it's likely to be his crowning achievement with the series, to have tricked everybody into condemning these ice people too soon before we knew enough about them. And then somewhere in the third act, surprise, the others were actually the good guys or the victims or whatever, right? They're the victims of humanity. They didn't want to be on the other side of the wall. We just locked them over there. Or maybe they were normal, healthy people to begin with, and then just being on that side of the wall for so long turned them into what they are. Or who knows what, right? It almost doesn't matter. But the story's built-in ethic as a whole seems to almost demand that the others receive some sort of sympathetic recontextualization to show us that even people as obviously evil as the others have a sympathetic backstory that in great amount explains how they got there, and in a way that you can see could have gotten you there had you gone through the same thing. And as a theme or a moral lesson, I think that's a great one, worthy of any grand epic fantasy story like this one. But as you've probably noticed about me by now, I'm not a Song of Ice and Fire theorist. I'm a Song of Ice and Fire researcher. And the question that concerns me the most is not so much what the story ought to be saying, but what the story is saying. And in order to do that properly, you have to make a great and consistent effort to hold in limbo your preconceived ideas about what it's saying. Because if the lesson of a story is something different or opposite to what you think it is, you'll never be able to see it, even if it's right in front of you, unless you suspend your preconceived ideas about it. I think it's hard for people to come to terms with the idea that there are or even can be people out there who genuinely want to make other people suffer and genuinely enjoy it. I think most people don't know that, and that it's the sort of a thing that you can't accept until you've encountered it yourself, either within someone who you came close to or within yourself, usually by going through a really dark time in your life, like a struggle with depression or addiction, or a struggle with family abuse, or really anything that can drive a person to become so resentful and hateful of the world that he can't stand to look at parts of it that are good and happy without being filled with an intense jealousy and hatred and an impulse to destroy it. And until and unless, God forbid, a person does have a brush with malevolence like that, I think there's denial. There's a tendency to deny that kind of thinking or person can actually really exist. That's what we call in fiction a poorly written villain. One who, he's not really humanized. He's just there to be evil in a cartoonish sort of way in order to give the heroes someone to fight and defeat. And I think A Song of Ice and Fire is in many ways a response to exactly that kind of naivety, where you have part of the population who are not naive about that. They know that evil is real and that there are people who just want evil. They just simply want it. And that you have to fight them. And then there's another part of the population, much bigger, that is naive about that, and they're kind of in denial about it. And that makes those people and that society as a whole, because they're the majority, extremely vulnerable. Because if you don't think people like that exist, you're basically a sitting duck for whenever any number of them decide to target you. And so I think that's a lot of what the others are about in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's about showing you just how much of your society is naive about evil. Because look at how much harm the others will do before you can get the majority of people to condemn them. There's no doubt in my mind that before the majority of the Ice and Fire audience comes to agreement that the others are evil and need to be destroyed, the number of people killed by them, corpses desecrated by them, buildings destroyed by them, and peace interrupted by them will be so high that it becomes impossible for anyone to imagine that if you lived in this world and had to put up with this, you could in any way be worthy of condemnation for fighting back against them. There's a common saying you hear throughout Westeros where whenever people want to curse each other or something, they say, "The others take you." In Bran's first chapter, Jon and Robb are in disagreement about whether the Night's Watch guy who was executed was brave or afraid. Robb says that he died bravely, but Jon says that there was fear in his eyes. And unimpressed, Robb says, "The others take his eyes," he swore. "He died well. Race you to the bridge?" And so that's one of the things that we can infer about the others, is that whatever they want, whatever they are, whatever their culture is, one of the things that's for certain about the others is that the others take. And it doesn't matter what the thing is. The curse isn't specific to any category of things. The curse the others take is used in reference to everything you can imagine, from people to things. And with the object of what the others take being basically infinite, the only commonality or theme that can be extracted about the others from that curse is simply that the others take. In life, I'm sure everybody has at some point found it useful to divide people into two types: givers and takers. And I think most people learn to pay attention to what kind of person they're dealing with. Is this a giver or is this a taker? Is what I do for this person going to be returned or reciprocated or even appreciated or not? And even on the other side of it, the question of, is what this person is doing for me actually for me? Or is there some ulterior motive behind doing it? Like they're hoping to get something from me, or they want something from me. And maybe that's the real reason they're giving right now. With a taker, even their giving is just a roundabout form of taking. And with givers, it's quite the opposite. It's that even their taking is a form of giving. Where often one of the hardest things for a giver to learn in life is how to accept help and let people help you, and understand that by letting them help you, you're doing something nice for them. Because other people who are also givers enjoy helping you. As with any idea, you don't want to take it too far. But yeah, in general, I think most people use that dichotomy in just everyday life to get the measure of people and know who they're dealing with and what to expect and all that. And so it could be fair to think of a Westeros that has been conquered by the others as a world in which the takers are in charge, basically. That the surest assumption upon encountering any stranger is that this is a person who's going to take me for all I'm worth, and that their giving should not be trusted because it's just a roundabout form of taking in some way. I haven't really gotten to the things I meant to talk about. I was just improvising all that crap. What I really wanted to talk about in this video was about the others and moral relativity. One of the problems with having a value system that says that everybody's value system is equally valid is that it's really no value system at all, because value system has boundaries. Having values means having definitions of things that are wrong. But if everybody's values are valid, then nobody's values are wrong. So relativity, at least of the moral kind, leaves its host with no direction and no principles and no reason to intervene anytime or anywhere that something bad is happening. Because no matter what the bad thing that's happening is, the feeling is, who am I to judge that that's wrong? What gives me the right to impose my value system upon the people I'm looking at? And the horrible thing is that this rationale holds up no matter what you're looking at. No matter if the event you encounter is a robbery, a rape, or a murder, the truest believer of moral relativity will pass right by without a second glance. The unconditional live and let live attitude of the moral relativist directs him to pass right by, because to intervene in any way would break that moral code. And if I was that person who walked past and didn't do anything about it, somebody saw me do it, and then came up to me afterwards and asked me, "Hey, why didn't you do anything there?" A really easy way for me to avoid criticism is to say, well, I don't know the full circumstances of that situation, so I couldn't make a moral judgment. How do I know that the person doing the robbing is not simply robbing something back that originally belonged to him and was robbed from him. How do I know that the two people in the alleyway over there is really a rape? Maybe they're just shooting a provocative video for TikTok or filming a homemade movie. Or maybe they're really a consenting couple who are just role-playing something in public because they're freaky like that. So there's no shortage of conceivable scenarios that a person can imagine in order to relieve themselves of the responsibility to take action when encountering something that almost certainly should not be. And if you were to get a whole society of people to basically behave this way, to look the other way whenever they see something wrong, and to rationalize it afterwards with this exhibition of their intellect by rattling off all of the possible scenarios they can imagine in which the thing they saw was not actually evil and therefore does not require them to take action, you would end up with a society that could very much be symbolized by the society in the story, Westeros, or the Seven Kingdoms, because the threat beyond the wall, the others, is largely ignored and dismissed by most of Westeros. They don't take it seriously. They're preoccupied with their own political squabbles and their day-to-day interests and all that. When the threat is brought to their attention, they mock it and disbelieve the stories about the monsters. And even respect for the institution that guards the wall, the Night's Watch, is in a state of decline, as we can see when Yoren brings Arya and the gang from King's Landing to the wall. Yoren thinks to himself bitterly, you know, there used to be a time when a Night's Watch brother would be feasted from King's Landing to the wall, and now he can't even get a place to sleep. And so in this concept of the symbolism of the others, it's easy to see that Westeros is very much symbolizing a society that is naive about evil. They don't think it's real or that it exists. And isn't that convenient? Because if evil doesn't exist, then when you see it, you don't have to do anything about it. And when you get a whole society of people not doing anything about it, the evil piles up and it gets worse. And just like with the others, there's going to come a time when the dam breaks. The people, thing, and institutions that are holding the evil back are going to fail. And then the dangers and harms that the takers pose are going to be so close to home that nobody can ignore them anymore. And ostensibly no longer having a choice in the matter, they'll finally decide to unite under one cause. And that cause is defeat the others. I guess I should talk about the Wights too. Others and Wights are not the same thing. Others are tall and slender, and they carry like these magical unbreakable swords that are sharp as razors. They talk to each other and laugh and mock, and they're thinking, and they fight as if they know how to fight. The Wights are much the opposite. Wights are basically just reanimated corpses. It doesn't seem like they can think. They don't really know how to fight, except maybe if they knew how to fight when they were alive. Some of that ability might be retained in their body, possibly. It's hard to tell. They don't have magic swords. They don't have like camouflage magic armor or anything like that. They just wear whatever they were wearing when they were dead. And they're not beautiful. They're as ugly as you would imagine a reanimated corpse would be. Their body parts are decaying and rotten. They're often severed. And then after their body parts are severed, that body part still moves. Like we see Jon being attacked by a severed hand of a Wight. The others might work the same way, but it remains to be seen. We've never seen an other killed or dismembered or anything. The Wights also seem to be used as Trojan horses sometimes. I think there was 2 Night's Watch guys who died north of the wall. Their corpses were rotting by the time Jon and the gang found them, and then their bodies were brought back across the wall into Castle Black, where one night they rose from the dead, which shouldn't be possible, because supposedly the wall blocks the magic. So apparently the magic that reanimates the Wights was placed into the Wights before they were found, with the hope that the Night's Watch would find them and bring them across the wall, where they would be reanimated and maybe kill the Lord Commander. And the Lord Commander is exactly who they went for. And so the Wights definitely seem to be tools of the others, because if they're not, then that situation was an astounding coincidence. In retrospect, the situation looks too calculated to have been a coincidence. I guess another thing to note about the Wights is that there's no werewolf mechanic going on with them. With werewolves, if you get bitten by a werewolf, you turn into a werewolf. That's kind of the rule of werewolves. But it's not the same with Wights. If you get killed by a Wight, there's no like infection or curse that goes into your blood or your body or anything. Necessarily. You're just dead. And then you can be reanimated once you're dead, but you don't need to have been killed by a Wight to be reanimated. They can reanimate any corpse who died for any reason. But like the others, the Wights have these like bright blue eyes that kind of marks them for what they are. Icy blue. So there's some symbolism about the others I haven't really talked about much. Their iceness, their association with ice and cold and all that. Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. When you say that somebody is warm, that usually means they're friendly and good. When you say that somebody's cold, it's the opposite. They're unfriendly. They're bad. And so it is with the others. But ice is really the coldest thing there is. And fire is really the hottest thing there is. Probably not technically. Like maybe lava is hotter than fire. I don't know. But at least colloquially, they are. Whenever you want to reference the hottest of the hot, you refer to fire. And whenever you want to reference the coldest of the cold, you refer to ice. So ice and fire is an archetypal dichotomy. And the others being so strongly associated with ice casts them as the embodiment of the ice side of that dichotomy. Where these are the pinnacle of coldness and unfriendliness and hatred and resentment and murder and all the bad things. Which kind of leaves us to imply that fire is the opposite. That the story's personification of fire, the dragons, is going to be the good, life-giving, warm, friendly counterweight to the others. And so what pretty much every reader comes to imagine eventually about the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire is that in some way it's going to come down to a battle between the others and the dragons, where the dragons are the good guys and the others are the bad guys. And the dragons are going to be basically humanity's last hope, the thing that saves humanity from the others. And I think that would make a very epic way to end any fantasy series, of course. And that's one of the things that we're all kind of always looking forward to in any fantasy series. Because one of the tropes of fantasy is that there's a final battle between good and evil. And it's like, it's a real battle. It's not some fake, battle of ideas or whatever. Like, it's fantasy. The ideas need to be embodied in the characters so that they can physically have it out and somebody wins, Anything less than that would just not be fantasy. It wouldn't fall into this genre, So the questions are, who's the bad guys and who's the good guys? And then who's going to win and how, I guess. And that's kind of the template that everybody starts with. It's the others are the bad guys, the dragons are the good guys, and they're going to have it out at the end, with humanity on the side of the dragons, and the dragons on the side of humanity. The others on the side of just death, basically. Death and evil. Much as I think that battle would be really cool to see, I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think that's the red herring. And what I mean is, I think the ice and fire are going to end up allies, basically. They're going to both be enemies to humanity and goodness. Intentionally or not, they're going to work in tandem to bring humanity to the brink of destruction and force them to reunite under nothing more than their humanity, their shared humanity, to defeat both threats, the ice and the fire. And if you want to see the seeds of this kind of ending in the author's inspirations, you don't need to look any further than the poem, the Robert Frost poem, that George R. R. Martin says is a poem that inspired the inception of the whole story. The poem is by Robert Frost, and it goes like this. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. I hope I got that right from memory. So in that poem, you have the world being destroyed by fire and ice. Maybe that's where A Song of Ice and Fire's ending is headed. You know, there's a common saying throughout this series that I don't totally understand yet. I mean, I don't understand why it's there, what the author's purpose with it is, but it comes up so frequently that the only purpose it can't have is nothing. And the saying goes something like, at night all banners are black. And I think maybe the purpose of having that saying or idea just come up so many times throughout the series is to refer to the long night, because the long night is basically what happens after the others win. It's what I was describing earlier, where the state of the world is that the takers are in control, and they just go around taking, and everybody's kind of cowering in their castles, hoping that they're not the next ones to be visited, and having to communicate in secret and find a way to cast these takers out and reclaim their kingdom in the name of warmth and life and all that. So if the night in the saying, at night all banners are black, is a sneaky reference to the long night, and the color of the banners represents the cause, motivations, or allegiances of the people of Westeros, then all the banners appearing to be black in the night could mean that all of the people of Westeros are unified under one cause during the long night, out of necessity. I didn't need these books today after all. Anyway, guys, I think that's going to wrap up this episode about the others. As always, I hope at least something I said helped increase your understanding of A Song of Ice and Fire's themes and the things in it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.